Hi, welcome to learnhowtogarden.com, and in today's episode of the 10-Minute Gardener I want to tell you why I think using modules for sowing really does get you ahead of the game. If you're not already subscribed to us at learnhowtogarden.com, there's a link directly below this film that'll take you to the website. Input your email address and it means every time I put up a new film I can let you know, and it also means you get access to my newsletter which I bring out once a month with sort of relevant topics and bits of what I think are really useful information and interviews with some of the characters in horticulture. It's the middle of March here in the UK and about 90% of the country is still got a white blanket over it. It's covered in snow, and that's not really good for your sowing. Now, if we were sowing things like tomatoes, which we should be doing now, chilies, they've already been sowed, they've got to be somewhere in heat. But I'm thinking more about things like Brussels sprouts, which is a really long growing season. Now, I wouldn't sow them outside. Well, obviously with snow, you'd have to clear the snow first. That wouldn't be practical. So the way I've always sown my Brussels is into these. And these are module trays, and as you can see, these have been used quite a few times. They're quite mucky, and basically you've got little individual holes, and they come in this size. And I suppose this is the other one a lot of us have seen. You know, if you go out and you buy summer bedding, they'll come in modules this size, but I don't really think you need them that big for what we're doing today. And the advantage of sowing in modules are sort of threefold really. One, you get no root disturbance whatsoever when you transplant these seedlings, which means that we get that really smooth linear growth that we want with most things, rather than an up and down like a heart monitor, which is not good for anything. Two, we can sow at a time of the year when we've got weather that is inclement, frost, snow at the moment, really heavy rain that makes the ground unworkable. And three, what I really like is that you only then have to put plants in at the correct spacing. You know, if you direct sow, for instance, you may get spaces that you want to fill. As you probably saw, this tray is a bit mucky. With things that are going to go out in the garden, like my Brussels and a lot of the brassicas, I don't bother washing these trays each year, you know, sterilising them. Once the plants have been planted out, they get a good wash and they're left. If I was putting these seeds out into the earth, they'd have to deal with the same microorganisms that they'll have to deal with in the potting compost. The next thing, you want some decent potting compost. Now, what I've got in here is a good high quality potting compost, and it's in a riddle, and a riddle is one of the essential things if you're going to grow in modules, or if you're going to sow in seed trays. It really is essential. This is the cheapest sort you can buy. This is a horrible plastic thing, and I'm using it just to show you what it does. My preferred riddles are some wonderful beech sort of steamed riddles that are still made in England by Hill & Son, which is what I use. But I thought I'd buy this because this is the, you know, less than £4 this cost me, to show you that it'll do its job. And what you do is literally riddle your compost. And the reason I want to do this, and I'll do this and then show you, is to show you what you're left with. After a couple of moments or a couple of minutes riddling, we're left with very fine or much finer compost with no very large pieces in it, which is fantastic for sowing our seeds. But what I really want to show you is this. These are bits of the sort of green waste which haven't quite composted down. There's some very large sort of solid chunks in here, all of which, I mean, that's a solid piece of wood. None of this would make it particularly easy for your seeds to germinate. So this little cheapo riddle, or, you know, my advice is don't get this one, buy yourself a really nice riddle, will make a huge difference to your sowing success. But don't throw this away. I mean, what I'm going to do in a minute is just chuck it behind me into one of the sort of trenches in the bed behind me where the tomatoes will be growing in the summer. Get it in the ground. It will compost down over a period of time, but just not now with what we're doing in this seed tray. And filling the seed tray couldn't be easier. Put it on top, move it around with your hand. Remember, it doesn't have to be solid, but it does have to be compacted enough that those seeds are going to come into contact with the earth, which will supply the water, which will help the seeds realise it's time to germinate, and also, if it's compacted properly, they give the roots a much more stable environment to grow. So once it's done, you just drop it a couple of times. And like all seeds, Brussels are no different. They need to be about twice their depth into these little individual modules. Then we take the most essential tool for anybody gardening over 50, your glasses, and using the end of your thumb or finger very gently create a depression in this compost. The one thing I would say is when you get your seed trays, and mine are kept in my greenhouse over the winter, these little beauties love the underneath of these trays for hibernating, and you're going to see enough of these in the summer to have any eat in these seedlings. So unfortunately that has to suffer the fate of most snails, which is a quick squeeze, throw him behind you. Thank you very much, Mr. Robin, come and deal with him. Once we've got a small depression in the top of each one, take your Brussels seeds, which are like most brassicas, small sort of round balls. And the easiest way I find to sow them is to put a few into your hand and then literally using the lifeline in your hand, bend your hand, tap your hand and drop one into each module. The reason I only drop one is I know some of these won't germinate, but to be honest the compost's cheap enough, I don't really worry about that. I'd rather have one in each and not have to prick them out than to sort of oversow them. So I'll just put one in each module, then take a tiny bit more of the compost, riddle that on top and water it in. So a seed in each, covered with a very fine layer of the sift compost, just taken off with your hand, watered, and then keep it covered. I don't mean in a propagator, just keep it either in a cold frame or you could keep it outside with a piece of fleece on top of it and allow these to develop. Watch out for slugs, because if we do get a sort of warm snap, they will love these small seedlings. And the reason I'm using Brussels is they need to go in now, but you can do this with most of your vegetables that come from the brassicas, so that's most of your Chinese things can go in here. Your cabbages, cauliflowers, things like that would do really well in these modules. Lettuces do brilliantly. Even carrots, if you use the small round ones. Obviously parsnips or the long carrots won't work in modules at all. Anything with a long taproot really doesn't work. And I'd say for things that grow really quickly, like your beetroot or your chard, it's far too small. Better off to use a bigger module or something like a Jiffy 7. So that's really 2 in 1. Why you should be sowing your Brussels now and why you should be sowing in them in modules. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that.